Switch this down so I can pick up the slides better. Okay, there were what, just 2 or 3 articles? I guess 3 articles here. First one, getting technology life cycles in sync. This is a problem that I suspect a number of you have already dealt with some of your jobs. The companies want silver bullets. They want to adopt new technologies that are going to make things wonderful. There are problems that you often occur. First problem is what I call the firefly. This is where it's like, oh, we've got this great new 1.0 release or 0.9 release of this programming language, IDE, database technology, whatever, library. And it's like, okay, well, it's not quite ready for prime time, but by golly, the 1.1 release will be fine. And you wait for that, and it's like, well, it's not quite baked yet, and well, the 2.0 release, and you sit and wait, and then it sort of goes away. This happens regularly. Have any of you experienced this with where your company was going to adopt a technology, and you kept trying to do it, and you basically had to abandon it? Yeah, a couple of hands here.
So basically, last employer was just more of an IT role, not a development role, but yeah, it was basically the entire time I worked there, we were always talking about the next release of particular software for the whole time.
Yes?
I was working at a company once, and we were using technology where that was relatively new, and we started working on some stuff and realized that one of the main features that we needed it wasn't able to actually support, and then it got a new version, right? Oh, well, we can do it with this one, and then we still couldn't do it, and I was talking to a bunch of people in the community, and they're like, oh, well, maybe if you do this, you know, and it was just a lot of flipping back and forth, and it just wasn't getting done.
Yep, anyone else? Anyone else have some horror stories? Yeah,
Not work necessarily, but a research job. We just couldn't decide what we were going to work on, and then we would kind of get an idea, work on it, and decide that we had to backtrack all the time.
Actually, I had that experience in my very first programming job, which was for the computer-assisted translation project here on campus when I was an undergraduate. Basically, human-assisted analysis of language into a neutral language form, and then simultaneous synthesis of 5 different languages. And it was based on a grammar theory called junction grammar by Alden Lytle, which was great grammar theory. I took a couple of classes in it. I thought he had some real brilliant stuff. But during the 4 years I worked on it, the problem we'd have is we would get about 70% complete towards implementation. And Dr. Lytle would come back and say, you know, I've rethought junction grammar and made some fundamental changes in it. And we'd have to go through and I mean, this is stuff that would affect the whole underlying representation of language and how everything worked. And we'd go back and we went through this at least twice during the 4 years I was here. And among the engineers, it's like, can you just leave it alone? Let us get all the way to like a 1.0 release? It didn't happen during my 4 years here. Okay, underdone is sort of, this is more along, a lot along the lines there too, where you get a new release, an established product that isn't quite ready for production use. This is a classic .0 release thing. Well, we're releasing Java, what's Java up to? 9, 10, 11? Releasing Java 11.0, and you go to use it, and you suddenly discover there's stuff that's broken in it. And then you have to wait for 11.0.1 or 11.1 or 11.2 or whatever. Conveyor belt is technology that starts with a limited lifespan. Now, the lifespan may be measured in years, and as we'll talk about in 2 articles later, sometimes that lifespan is measured in decades. And it's not really a conveyor belt. But you'll have a company that will release a product, and you'll start to develop it. Your development cycle may take you a couple of years, and you release, and the vendor says, oh, by the way, we're phasing that out. Or we're replacing that with something entirely new and better. And it's kind of like, okay, do we go ahead and release and try to keep this living on the older technology as long as we can? Do we try to convert now? What do we do? And then landfill is the technology that has great height and is pretty much never materializes at all. It's dead on arrival. This could be hardware products. I mean, for all that we use smartphones and tablets, there were handheld programming devices, Newton, Go, that predate the current generation by a good 10 to 15 years, that were hyped and then just died. You have development environments, Intelligent. I have a whole set, I mean, about literally this thick on my bookshelf. Thick, high-quality manuals from Madison Wesley for the Intelligent environment, which was an object-oriented environment, supposed to be multi-platform. And funded, it was co-funded by Apple, HP, and IBM. And when it finally released, it was such an enormous resource hog that it just died. No one ever used it. I don't think there were ever any intelligent applications. I don't think they ever really got adopted ever. Any experiences with any of these? Anyone? Anyone? I was like, no, let's get through the lecture. Okay. It's okay. The arc of engineering. This is one of those things that's kind of obvious in retrospect. For a given system under development, you tend to have this increasing improvement in the quality and functionality of the system. And then you reach a point where it starts to decline. It starts to gather a lot of cruft, a lot of unnecessary complexity. The overall bug quality starts to decline. You're getting more bugs. The functionality can be harder to program for. Frankly, I think iOS has passed the peak, and it's just getting harder it's getting more buggy, more funky. Apple's quality control seems to have gone downhill in the last few years. That's my own opinion. So, there are a number of reasons for this. You have software bloat. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Larger, just in terms of sheer number of lines of code. Larger software is, the harder it is for any one person to understand it. You lose conceptual unity. You lose people who understood key things about it that are not documented. So when other people come in and have to either fix bugs or add features, they're doing it in a much less elegant way than the original people would have done. You have software rot setting in. Someone's asked, add this feature, and they basically shoehorn and duct tape and do whatever it takes to get that feature working. And it makes the system less stable, not more stable. It makes it more fragile, not more robust. The system itself outgrows its original foundation. Now, the advantage, quote unquote, that software has had has been Moore's Law. That, memory keeps getting cheaper. A friend of mine just posted on Facebook, and storage gets cheaper. A friend of mine just posted on Facebook an external hard drive, 8 terabytes for $149, which is it's pretty much what 4 terabytes was something for a year ago. But part of the problem is that you have organizations and developers that are simply throwing memory at software. And they are being, I'm not going to sit here and argue that you should count bytes. But there's a lot of sloppiness in modern software. It's like, oh, we'll just throw all this in memory and we'll just do this and we can require, we can up the requirement from 2 gigabytes to 4 gigabytes and just throw all this data in memory and we'll get it. And what you end up is with this software bloat. It becomes harder and harder to know what's going on. You have the market or business needs shift beyond the product's fundamental design. I had this had a Facebook message exchange with a very good friend of mine. Bob Trammell, he's my age, actually he's a year older than me, has made a very good living for the last 10 years, probably 15 years, simply as a specialist in FileMaker. Who knows what FileMaker is? I'll have to tell him that. FileMaker is a database program that was originally designed for Apple IIs 30 years ago. Ported over to Macintosh. It was a very popular small business database program for the Macintosh. And the company is still around. And they're now reimagining themselves and touting themselves as a way to build fast applications. Quick app development. But they still call themselves FileMaker. I said, Bob, they really need to change your name. You have the developer extending the software beyond what it should do. And you have the issue of backward compatibility maintained at all costs. Okay. Again, any of you seen these in real life? Yeah.
Well, we had a bug in a web page that we had where if you use Internet Explorer 9 or 11, all these characters that we had kind of reprogrammed to show up as icons would show up as strange characters. Like
only in those two, yes. Who else? Yes.
Just about the floats thing, like, I was building a server, and this was for research, so it's not like as crucial, but I was talking to my advisor about removing stuff from memory so that we would decrease the load. And his response was, well, memory's cheaper than paying you to fix it, And, it's for research, but in some ways that's kind of, that's got to be the opinion that a lot of people take, right?
Well, it is, and that's exactly it. It's like, well, memory's cheap, we'll push everything in memory. And the problem with that is that as soon as you start to hit choke points, performance choke points, because if you've got a lot of data in memory, you have to do something with it. At the very least, if power goes out, you've got to reload it in memory. Now, I can only imagine what's going to happen when RAM is truly replaced by persistent memory. And you have systems with 16 gigabytes of basically static RAM that contains everything. It's going to get stuff is going to get really ugly, in my opinion. Yes?
Well, I've just had the experiences in other classes with like group projects where I write some really great piece of this project, and then I say, to my partner, well, you can take this other part, and he comes in and just totally messes up the beautiful structure I had in my code.
There you go. Well, this gets back to the conceptual integrity issue. This is chief software architect. It's like, okay, if you're going to do this, it has to do this, it has to do that, but it explains why software tends to rot over time. Yes?
So I think that conceptual, what's the most concise or fast way to pass on this conceptual integrity so that when you say, we're shifting gears here, when you did your architecture diagrams, did you use like a particular UML format or like?
No, actually I hand drew them. This predated UML and Rational. So it was using what was then, so we're talking like 1990, 91. The notation, there were some common notations there. It was probably Code Jordan, C-O-A-D, who had 3 books on object-oriented architecture, design, and implementation. But it was a fairly simple and straightforward notation. But I would sit down and talk with them about it. And as code came in, as the chief architect, I was in everyone's code. I was in everyone's code. I would look it over. I would do code reviews literally on everything that was written. And if I saw stuff that was breaking the architecture, I'd bring it to their attention. Either say you have to do this differently, or I would go in and tell them, I am refactoring this to better fit within the architecture. Yes?
And we sort of have a similar structure in our group in this class. Like on our GitHub branch, the master branch is protected, and so it's got to be reviewed by someone else before you can pull it. And it makes, I like it a lot.
And I've mentioned this before already. Tom Affinito at Taligent said one of their best practices at Taligent for code review wasn't these big formal reviews. It was that at the end of each workday, you had to grab someone else and sit down and go over with them everything you had done that day. All the new stuff you'd written, all the changes you had made. He said, we found that eliminated 90% of the code review issues. That just the fact of having to sit down each day and say, okay, I wrote these routines again. Why did you do that? Oh, well, I was sort of quick and dirty. Well, what's the problem here? In other words, it's the same thing that we've talked about with debugging. My favorite debugging technique when I'm stuck on a bug is to grab someone and start to explain, I'm stuck on this bug, this is what's happening. And my professional experience is at least 80% of the time, I get halfway through and say, oh, never mind. just in the process of trying to explain the bug and what I've done so far to someone else, I usually make the connection. Other observations, yeah.
I've noticed this a lot in Kickstarters, which is, I find quite funny because they're trying to start a business and they're adding the kitchen sink before they even live in the first promise.
And that's the start out stupid and work out from there issue. They like to do it because they want to get more money, and it's sort of, well, if you do money, you'll do this. Star Citizen. Star Citizen. I'm not sure Star Citizen will ever see the light of day. I didn't give them any money. It was very attractive to me because this is sort of like an uber hyper version of Sundog, which I did 30 years ago. So that genre appeals to me greatly. But actually, when I first saw it, what was there? Did they break 100? How quickly did they break 100 million?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, I saw that and thought, this is going to end so badly. This is going to end so badly because they have too much money and not enough constraints.
And they're getting close to 200 million now.
Yeah, my personal suspicion, I haven't been asked to go in and do an extensive review or anything. My personal suspicion, simply based on the failed projects I reviewed, is whatever they deliver is going to be very underwhelming. It's not, and you see other Kickstarters that actually do a great job. For example, board game Kickstarters usually do a wonderful job. Why? They're constrained. It's a board. You have pieces. It's not like, oh, we're going to make the board four-dimensional and multiplayer. Well, it's multiplayer. You have people sitting around the board. And I've backed a number of board games. I actually have, in one board game, I have a card that I designed because I backed it enough. So, but software Kickstarters, man, those are risky, particularly when they're popular, because they get too much money in and they don't know how to say no. They don't know how to say, we're going to do a minimal viable product, get it out, and maybe then we'll do a second Kickstarter and add features. Any other comments before? Yes?
This sounds sort of like the idea of like blockchain ICOs that have come up recently, where they it sounds sort of similar to the blockchain ICOs that have come up recently,
Mm-hmm.
like promising some sort of use case solution with tokenized model. What do you think about that?
What I think about blockchain, or what I think about software bubbles? Software bubbles happen all the time. I personally lost my job because of the PC bubble crashing in 1988, which most people don't know about because most PC companies back then were private. But boy, I can tell you, I sure felt it. The big one was the, of course, .com crash, which is sort of scary to think it was 18 years ago. My gosh, you guys are all primary. And what happened with the .com crash is you had it was the advent of the World Wide Web, which really just started up in the mid-90s. And suddenly people realized that, by making the web, the internet, visible and easily accessible through browsers to ordinary people, you could come up with business models to get lots of money. Well, what that quickly moved on to was you could come up with business models that said, we have lots of eyeballs. We'll get millions of people looking at our website, and we'll just, by golly, there's going to be some way to turn that into a lot of money. And this became a frenzy. There was a ad I remember from one of these, I don't know if it was E-Trade, one of these investment companies, that showed a tow truck driver who was coming to tow some, moderately well-off guy's BMW that had some kind of mechanical problem. The rich guy climbs into the cab with the tow truck driver, and he notices up on the, what's the word I'm looking for?
Visor?
Yeah, the sun shield, a little blind in it. He sees a picture of a small tropical island. He says, oh, planning on a vacation there? And the tow truck driver says, no, I own it. Then it cuts to E-Trade, best now. I mean, this was the mindset. That ordinary people were getting very wealthy. You had this enormous, I mean, literally trillions of dollars go into the stock market. It peaked in March of 2000. And then suddenly people realized that an awful lot of these companies really had no path to profitability. And the NASDAQ started declining. Either peak was either late February or early to mid-March of 2000, and did not recover back to that level for 17 years. It was a tremendous wipeout of wealth. We're not quite at that stage, but frankly, a lot of those unicorns in Silicon Valley, I have great doubts that their market value based on either projected or actual IPOs really is sustainable. I don't see what the path to profitability is. At least not path to sufficient profitability to justify the price-earnings ratio they have. Okay, now let's talk about, oops. Oh, that is it. This is an article I wrote back in 1996 talking about how technology embeds itself. And what I said back in 1996 is, as impossible as it may seem, Windows may still be dominant in 2025, nearly 30 years from now. This is Windows desktop market share as of this past July. I think this prediction will pass easily. Now, the prediction did not deal with the advent of smartphones and tablets. But you know what? There's still a couple of billion desktops and laptops out there. They're going to, I think, slowly go away over time. But I think that time will be measured in decades, not years. And as I say here, our grandchildren will wonder about the quaint relics of terminology and workflow. When was the last time any of you actually put gloves in the glove compartment? But they'll be able to clearly see the inheritance from MS-DOS Windows to whatever they use. Windows still dominates. It has about 75 to 80% of the market of desktops and laptops. Yeah.
With their dominance in that market, why do you think they failed in the phone market?
Because there was no entrenchment of technology. Because Windows sucks, that's why. And I say that as someone who's used Windows for 30 years. No, that's actually a very good point, and I should probably, one of the lectures I may do, a piece I wrote a number of years ago about how you displace an entrenched technology. And I've got a set of rules that you have to do it. Basically, this is not because Windows is an outstanding operating system. It's because they won the market share all the way back in the early 90s. In fact, it was really Windows 95. Windows 95, and I'm speaking to someone who personally was alive back then. Yeah. The thing, well, I was alive when it came out. A few of you may have been. Here's why Windows 95 was so significant. There was a real battle for conception of desktops between Macintosh and Microsoft. And Macintosh was seen as a clear leader. Windows 95 was not superior to what the Macintosh was offering then, but it was good enough. And it ran on all sorts of hardware. The Mac OS only ran on Macintoshes. This allowed Microsoft to basically take over. Back then, they zoomed up to close to 90% of market share. So it's actually declined some over time. But it was good enough. But the problem they face, and that I talk about when you read this article, assuming you have it, You know, I talk about the first sufficiently adequate technology usually gains broad acceptance and entrenches itself, but the problem is you're now stuck with that. We have been talking about electric cars for decades. But here's the problem. We have gas station infrastructure, not just the gas station themselves, but refineries and tanks and everything else, that dates back 100 years. It's entrenched. So if you want to somehow replace that or supplant it with charging stations, you've got to find the real estate. And where do you get the ubiquity? Particularly since electric cars right now are much more limited in range than gas cars. So the charging stations have to be more frequent and closer together. That's a massive infrastructure investment to try and set up those charging stations. This is true of a lot of technologies, is that once something becomes entrenched, you know, there was a, when the first, you know, IBM introduced its PC, and that became the standard. There's a whole interesting story. Go back and read about Compaq and their clean room reverse engineering of the BIOS, and then winning on a legal challenge that they were allowed to do that. And you had an IBM compatibility, but as someone noted at the time, the issue was not IBM compatibility. It was software compatibility. You could run the same software on these clones, these IBM clones, that you could run on the IBM PC itself. And that's what people cared about. This issue, by the way, is the issue why Blu-ray, and I'll have to do this lecture, it's why Blu-ray really hasn't wiped out DVDs. Because there is, you know what's hit DVDs? Was it Blu-ray? What is it? What do y'all do?
Streaming.
Streaming, yeah. It's streaming. Because you need a clear advantage. Blu-ray was a slightly higher resolution, well, more higher, but you know, for all intents, for the purpose of most average consumers, a Blu-ray disc is simply a slightly higher resolution version of a DVD.
Which may not be better on a TV.
Which may not be better on your TV. Though actually nowadays, you know, most people have switched over to Blu-rays and are doing upscaling on the DVDs, so now you have even less differentiation between your DVDs and the Blu-rays. So what has truly supplanted DVDs is streaming because it offers a great competitive advantage. And you don't have to get rid of your DVDs to do it. We have boxes of DVDs and Blu-rays down in our basement, actually out in our storage locker now. But our son, how many of you have any interactions with the IT department? Our oldest son is Aaron Vivian, who runs the lab over there. Aaron has taken, literally, all of our DVDs and Blu-rays, ripped them all, and he's got a Plex server. So now, to watch any of our DVDs or Blu-rays, I bring up Plex on my TV, and it streams from his house, which is about 2 miles south of us, to our house over gigabit internet. I don't have to go digging through the boxes. I have our entire video library. By the way, we also have his entire video library, and the entire video library of several other of our children is all on this Plex server. He's got like a 40 terabyte server in his house for this. He's a true geek. Anyway, even more so than I. But once you get this stuff embedded, this is what happens. Okay, so that's that. Let's take about a 5-minute break. Try to get back here in about 5 minutes, and we'll go through the peopleware quickly, and then you're done for the day.